I stood frozen in the Manhattan penthouse as my wealthy boss held my husband's hand, while my mother-in-law grabbed the microphone and declared, "Julia, stop being selfish. Ryan and Victoria deserve their happiness." The chandeliers glittered, the crowd gasped, and my birthday party turned into their public coronation. That night, I realized it wasn't just an affair. It was a family conspiracy, and they thought I'd stay silent. Before we dive deeper, let me take just a second. If you're new here, welcome to Her Betrayal Stories. Don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next tale of sacrifice, betrayal, and jaw-dropping twists. And while you're here, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Share it in the comments. Who knows? The next story might echo something you've lived through yourself. I still remember that night in the Manhattan penthouse. Chandeliers glittered above, champagne flowed, and the city skyline shimmered through the glass walls. It was supposed to be my 39th birthday party, a celebration of me. Instead, it became the stage for my public humiliation. As I stood by the marble table, my husband Ryan laced his fingers with Victoria, my wealthy boss, the woman who signed my paychecks. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but before I could speak, Margaret, my mother-in-law, took the microphone. She looked radiant in her navy silk gown, her diamond brooch catching the light. And with the poise of a queen delivering a decree, she said, "Don't be selfish, Julia. Ryan and Victoria deserve their happiness." Her words cut sharper than any knife. Around me, Manhattan's elite whispered, their eyes darting between me, the wife, and the mistress paraded like a bride. I gripped the edge of the table, nails digging into the cloth, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I froze, because deep inside, I already knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a conspiracy. This betrayal hadn't begun tonight. It had been carefully orchestrated for months, maybe years. The faint perfume on Ryan's suit that wasn't mine. The hushed phone calls that ended the moment I walked into the study. Ethan, my brother-in-law, too drunk at dinner and blurting, "We all know anyway," before Richard silenced him with a glare. Lauren, my sister-in-law, stirring soup until it went cold, unable to meet my eyes. And then Margaret's remarks, dripping with poison disguised as concern. "Julia, dear, women your age burn out so easily. You should consider stepping back." I didn't realize then what she meant, but later, I saw the truth. They'd arranged my travel schedules to coincidentally align with Ryan's business trips. They shifted family dinners so I couldn't attend. They invited Victoria, my boss, into gatherings where I was suddenly the outsider. And then, one rainy Thursday, Margaret summoned me to Victoria's office for what she called a casual meeting. I arrived drenched from the storm, my shoes squeaking on the polished floor. And there they were, Richard, Margaret, Lauren, and Ryan, seated around the mahogany table. Victoria leaned casually against her desk, her manicured nails tapping a crystal glass. On the table lay two documents: my resignation letter from Hawthorne Capital, a drafted divorce settlement, both bearing my name. I stared, my voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" Margaret folded her hands, calm as though she were discussing the weather. "Julia, darling, this is for the best. You've been under so much stress. Ryan and Victoria, well, they've found happiness together. You should allow them to pursue it, without your interference. Without my interference." Ryan couldn't even meet my eyes. Victoria smiled faintly, victorious in her silence. I left that office numb, clutching my handbag like a lifeline. But inside me, something shifted. Not into weakness, but into clarity. I didn't beg. I didn't collapse. I played the role of the broken wife, The woman they expected would fade quietly. But while they celebrated their new beginning, I was already collecting evidence. Every cruel word, every manipulated schedule, every hidden transaction, I recorded it all. And tonight, in this penthouse, with Margaret's voice echoing in my ears and Ryan's hand resting openly on Victoria's, I realized this wasn't just betrayal. This was theater, a performance staged to erase me. But what they didn't know was that I was no longer the victim. I was the storm waiting to break. So let me ask you, if you were standing in that penthouse, your husband flaunting your boss as his lover, your family-in-law clapping for their affair, divorce papers already written in your name, what would you do? Would you walk away quietly, or would you fight back? The night in Victoria's office never left me. Her crystal glass, Ryan's silence, Margaret's calm cruelty. It was a scene scripted to erase me. After that meeting, something inside me hardened, but I didn't explode. Not yet. On the outside, I let them believe I was fading. I spent nights in the guest room, let my inbox overflow, even showed up late to work. When Margaret called, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, I played along. Julia, darling, maybe it's time you take a step back. A spa retreat, perhaps? Let Victoria handle things at the firm. I forced a faint smile into my tone. You might be right, Margaret. In their eyes, I became the fragile, distracted wife. But in truth, I was sharpening my vision, watching, listening, remembering. Every Sunday dinner turned into theater, choreographed lines, rehearsed silences. Richard carved roast beef with surgical precision while Margaret dropped hints about Ryan's bright future. Victoria's name floated across conversations more often than mine, as if she were already blood. Lauren, my sister-in-law, kept her gaze down, stirring her soup until it went cold. Ethan, the younger brother, drowned himself in wine, sometimes laughing too loudly, sometimes muttering truths he shouldn't. And Ryan, my husband. He sat across from me with the smugness of a man convinced he had already won. One evening, as I cleared plates, Ethan slurred, "Why pretend? She already knows." "We all know." Forks clattered. Margaret's glare cut through the air like glass. Richard cleared his throat, commanding silence. Ryan shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. That silence told me everything. The cruelty wasn't hidden anymore, it was paraded. One night, Ryan stumbled in late, his tie loose, his shirt smelling of a perfume I knew too well. I sat in the living room, phone in hand, pretending to scroll. "You should get some rest, Julia," he said casually, tossing his jacket aside. "These late nights don't suit you." I looked up, my voice steady. "And what about your late nights?" He smirked, eyes glinting. "At least mine are productive." That single line cut deeper than any blade, years of sacrifice, erased. Have you ever heard words like that? Words designed to make you small, invisible? If you have, then you know the sting that burned in my chest that night. But Margaret was far more dangerous than Ryan. She dressed her malice in silk and philosophy. One evening, as guests mingled, she leaned toward me, her diamond brooch catching the light. "Julia," she said softly, "a truly intelligent woman knows when to step aside. Men need freedom. They thrive when unburdened." Her tone was calm, polished, as though she were delivering a life lesson, not a justification for betrayal. I smiled faintly, nodded, and memorized every word. By then, I had already begun, weaving my net. Tyler, a trusted colleague, owed me more than one favor. Together, we combed through hotel invoices, jewelry receipts, credit card statements disguised as client dinners. Brenda Collins, a financial investigator, worked with quiet precision. She traced company funds funneled into Victoria's ventures, signed off by Ryan himself. Every piece of paper was another thread tightening around them. But I didn't rush. I let them believe I was weak, because the greater their arrogance, the harder their fall. Late September, after a 3-day work trip, I returned to Margaret's dining room expecting cold formality. What I walked into was worse. Victoria sat at the table, in my chair. Margaret's smile was brittle as glass. "Julia, dear, we thought it best you join us, so there are no misunderstandings." Victoria raised her glass, smirking. Ryan sat beside her, his hand covering hers like a public claim. My throat tightened. "What is this?" Richard's voice was firm. "A family decision. Ryan and Victoria will be moving forward. It's time you let go." Family decision. The words thundered in my ears. I stared at the flickering candles, the golden rims of the china plates, the sight of my husband's hand entwined with my boss's. My life was being rewritten in front of me. And then Ethan, drunk and bitter, let the truth spill. Why are we even pretending? Everyone here knew long before Julia did. The table rattled with dropped forks. Margaret hissed his name, but the damage was done. I looked around. No one denied it. Not a single person. The betrayal wasn't just Ryan's. It was collective. That night, lying in the guest room, I stared at the ceiling, realization burning in my chest. The cruelest part wasn't the affair itself. It was the collusion, the deliberate exclusion. They weren't just betraying me. They were erasing me. But what they didn't know was that I was several steps ahead. In my phone were recordings. Margaret's talk of freedom, Ethan's drunken confessions, even Victoria's smug laughter echoing in the background. I had more. Documents, receipts, voices. They thought they were scripting my exit, but I was writing their ending. Because while they celebrated their new beginning, I was preparing mine. And let me tell you this much. The birthday party they thought would humiliate me, that glittering Manhattan penthouse, it wouldn't be my downfall. It would be their stage of ruin. So let me ask you, if you had been seated at that table, your husband openly holding another woman's hand while your family-in-law applauded, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have risen? After that night at Margaret's dining table, Victoria seated in my chair, my husband's hand covering hers, I understood that fighting openly would only feed their triumph. So I made a choice. I would vanish into the version of Julia they wanted to see. On the surface, I shrank. I smiled faintly at Margaret's sugar-coated cruelty. I nodded as Victoria took credit for my ideas at work. I stopped questioning Ryan about his late nights. To them, I was a tired woman unraveling at the edges. But behind the mask, I was sharpening every blade. Every gathering became a stage. Richard sliced meat with surgical precision while Margaret spoke of new opportunities. Victoria's name slipped into conversations as though she had already been absorbed into the family bloodline. Lauren looked down at her plate, stirring soup until it went cold. Ethan, soaked in wine, let truths escape his lips. "Why pretend?" "She already knows," he muttered once. The silence that followed told me everything. I began recording. A phone under a napkin, a microphone hidden in my purse. Small fragments, but potent. At one dinner, Margaret's words were clear. "A smart woman invests in the future. Ryan and Victoria. That's the future." At a charity gala, Ryan joked to a colleague about expensing love. Laughter masked it as humor, but Brenda and I traced the bill to Cartier. $15,000 charged to the company account. Piece by piece, I built a puzzle. Fraud, collusion, betrayal, and they had no idea. The surprise came one pale afternoon. Lauren arrived at my apartment, twisting her hands, eyes wet. Julia, I can't keep this inside anymore. Her voice trembled as she confessed. Margaret had orchestrated my travel so Ryan could vanish with Victoria. She'd overheard her parents say, Julia's too focused on work to notice. That makes it easier. Tears spilled. I didn't stop them. I should have. But I can't watch this anymore. I listened, my mind recording her even before my phone did. Was it guilt? Or a desperate attempt to cleanse her conscience? Either way, I captured it. Truth is still truth, no matter why it's spoken. There is a kind of strength in stillness. People expect grief to scream. When you don't, they miscalculate. Broken things, after all, cut the deepest. So I let weeks pass. Ryan leaned over at brunch, whispering smugly, Don't worry, Julia. You won't have to put up with us much longer. I smiled softly. I know. He thought I meant surrender. What I meant was, victory was already in motion. October came. Leaves turned gold outside Central Park, crisp air sharpening every breath. My 39th birthday approached, and Margaret insisted on hosting it at Victoria's Penthouse. She called it a farewell to the past, a toast to the future. I called it opportunity, with Tyler and Brenda. I organized my arsenal: bank transfers, hotel receipts, expense reports, audio transcripts. Brenda even confirmed preliminary SEC interest. The folder grew heavy, like a loaded weapon. But paper alone wasn't enough. They had staged my humiliation before an audience. My revenge required the same theater. So I rehearsed my role carefully. At home, I remained passive, letting Ryan believe I was fading. At work, I smiled at Victoria's mentorship. With Margaret, I played obedient daughter-in-law, nodding at her wisdom. Each act a step closer to curtain rise. Every night, I locked the folder in my drawer and whispered to myself, just a little longer. 2 weeks before the party, I visited Danielle in Brooklyn. The skyline glittered through her loft window, steel towers glowing like embers. Are you sure? She asked, scanning the folder. Invoices, transcripts, photos slid through her fingers. Her eyes widened. Julia, this could destroy them. That's the point, I said. Danielle met my gaze. Then she nodded, jaw set. I'll be there. With a camera. Someone needs to capture their faces when the mask rips off. Her words steadied me, because I didn't just need evidence. I needed witnesses. In the days before my birthday, I let myself wander through Central Park. The branches arched overhead, golden leaves drifting down like ashes. I thought of the early days with Ryan, when Margaret once called me the backbone of the family. How quickly love had soured into entitlement. But then my mother's voice returned. Respect isn't given by blood, it's earned. They had never respected me. They respected what I could provide. That realization did not break me. It freed me. My 39th birthday. The penthouse glittered with chandeliers, violins filling the air, champagne sparkling in tall glasses. Guests mingled, unaware they were about to watch an empire collapse. Margaret walked to the stage, her voice steady, her smile radiant. Tonight, we honor Julia's resilience and the future of love. She gestured gracefully toward Ryan and Victoria, who stood close, smug, basking in the approval. The crowd murmured, curious, unsure. And me? I stood in the center of it all, leather folder pressed to my side, heart beating calm and steady, because tonight wasn't their stage. Tonight was mine. And here's where I'll pause, because if you were the one holding that folder, the proof that could topple a family and strip them of everything they'd stolen, what would you do? Would you reveal it in front of everyone, letting the shock echo through the chandeliers? Or would you strike in silence, behind closed doors, surgical and precise? Either way, the choice carries weight, and mine would define the rest of my life. The Manhattan skyline glittered outside the penthouse windows, every tower a shard of glass lit against the night. Inside, chandeliers pulsed with golden light, violins whispered in the background, and champagne flutes clinked like the rhythm of a countdown. Margaret had spared no expense for my 39th birthday, but looking around, I knew the celebration wasn't for me. It was a coronation, for Ryan and Victoria. I stood at the edge of the crowd, leather folder pressed against my chest like armor. Danielle lingered nearby, her camera hidden in a clutch, her lens angled discreetly toward the stage. Margaret's voice rose above the hum of conversation, smooth and commanding. Tonight, we honor Julia, her strength, her grace, her years of devotion, and yet life is about growth, about new beginnings. Ryan and Victoria have found theirs, and we must all embrace it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Whispered conversations spread like ripples across water. And then Margaret struck the cruelest chord. Don't be selfish, Julia. Ryan and Victoria deserve their happiness. The room froze. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, waiting for the explosion, the collapse. Instead, I smiled, calm, composed, ready. I stepped forward slowly, my heels clicking against marble, each sound sharp as a metronome. Someone tried to hand me a microphone, but my voice carried on its own. "Thank you, Margaret," I said softly. The crowd gasped. This wasn't the outburst they expected. They anticipated tears, rage, a dramatic exit. What they saw was composure. I reached into my folder and pulled out a sealed envelope, the paper thick and heavy in my hand. "This," I said, holding it up, "is my birthday gift. Not from you. From me. To all of you." Ryan's smirk faltered. Victoria's fingers tightened around her glass. Margaret's eyes narrowed, suspicion dawning. I handed the envelope to Ryan. "Go ahead. Open it." He tore it open with careless arrogance, expecting some sentimental plea. Instead, documents slid onto the polished floor, financial records, receipts, SEC letters, transcripts of conversations. The violin stopped mid-bow. Conversations died instantly. Ryan bent down, scanned the first page, and his face blanched. "What is this?" he demanded, voice cracking. "Proof," I said simply, "of everything. Fraud, embezzlement, collusion." Phones lifted discreetly, recording. Guests craned their necks, hungry for the scandal. Victoria lunged forward, but Danielle shifted closer, camera ready, capturing every frame of panic. I turned toward Margaret, who for the first time seemed rattled. "Do you remember telling me that an intelligent woman knows when to step aside?" I disagreed. "An intelligent woman knows when to strike." My voice sharpened, slicing through the air. "Ryan used company funds to buy Cartier jewelry, $15,000, the day after my promotion. He billed 4 nights at the St. Regis as a business trip, but he wasn't alone. And here," I held up the transfer receipts. "Funds funneled directly into Victoria's ventures. His signature is right there." Murmurs swelled into outrage. The glittering penthouse no longer buzzed with celebration. It shook with judgment. "And it wasn't just Ryan," I continued, my gaze fixed on Margaret and Richard. "Meetings arranged, my travel manipulated, secrets whispered. Richard, you called it a family decision." Richard's face hardened, but silence was an admission. And then Ethan, wine glass trembling in his hand, muttered loudly enough for all to hear. "She's right. We all knew." The room erupted. Gasps. Whispers. Some guests slipped away toward the elevators, but most stayed. drawn to the spectacle like moths to flame. Victoria stood abruptly, her voice shrill. "This is absurd. Julia, you're bitter. Jealous. You fabricated this." I raised a small recorder, pressed play, and let Margaret's voice fill the room. "A truly intelligent woman knows when to step aside. Men need freedom. They thrive when unburdened." A collective gasp tore through the guests. All eyes snapped to Margaret. I turned back to Victoria, my gaze steady. Fabricated or documented? Her face drained of color. Ryan slammed the stack of papers against the table, desperation cracking through his polished mask. "Julia, we can fix this?" I cut him off, my tone low and lethal. "No, Ryan, you broke this. You broke us." I stepped closer, voice dropping to a blade's edge. "This penthouse, this company, this empire, they're not your trophies, they're mine, and you've been trespassing." The guests murmured louder, phones raised, some shaking their heads in disgust. Margaret tried to salvage the moment. "Julia, be reasonable." "Reasonable?" I snapped, my voice carrying across the room. Reasonable was 15 years of sacrifice. Reasonable was Sunday dinners after board meetings. Reasonable was saving this family while you plotted my exile. Reasonable is over. Justice begins now. Danielle's camera flashed. Margaret's frozen face, Ryan's trembling hands, Victoria's pale mask. Captured forever. Then Ryan's phone buzzed violently. He glanced at the screen, his expression shattered. "SEC investigation launched. Immediate inquiry into Hawthorne Capital." The words spread quickly, whispered guest to guest until the whole room pulsed with shock. I stood taller, letting the silence swell around me. "You wanted to humiliate me tonight," I said, my voice calm, deliberate. "But you forgot one thing. I don't crumble. I rise." I turned slowly, meeting the gaze of every guest. Respect isn't given by blood. It isn't promised by vows. It's earned through love and loyalty. And if you can't honor that, you deserve to lose everything. I stepped back from the microphone, leaving the stage not to Ryan, not to Victoria, not to Margaret, but to the truth. For the first time in months, I felt free. Later, in my apartment, the city lights burned bright against the night sky. I thought I was done, until there was a knock at my door. Ryan, disheveled, desperate, stripped of arrogance. He fell to his knees. "Julia, please. I made a mistake. Don't leave me." The weight of his words pressed heavy in the room. I stared at him silently, my chest rising and falling. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. And freedom meant choice. So I'll ask you, if you were me, standing over the man who betrayed you, begging only after exposure, what would you do? Would you forgive or finally walk away? He knelt on the hardwood floor of my apartment, shoulders slumped, the weight of his arrogance gone. Ryan's voice cracked, raw, desperate, a sound I had never heard from him. "Julia, please," he whispered. "I'll fix it. I'll give everything back. Just don't leave me." For a long moment I studied him, the man I had once loved, the man I had defended in boardrooms and comforted during storms. But staring down at him now, I realized a truth I had ignored for years. He had never stood beside me. He had always stood on me. "Ryan," I said softly, my voice steady, "love doesn't conspire. Love doesn't deceive. And love doesn't steal." His eyes welled with tears. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Because forgiveness without accountability isn't grace. It's surrender. The weeks that followed unfolded like a slow-motion collapse. Hawthorne Capital was placed under full investigation. The SEC froze assets. Shareholders demanded blood. Ryan's name, once synonymous with financial prestige, appeared on headlines under three words that cut deeper than any blade: fraud, betrayal, collapse. Margaret, the woman who once ruled social circles with icy authority, found doors closed, invitations vanished, alliances evaporated. The empire she curated crumbled like shattered crystal. Richard retreated into silence, his authority hollow. Ethan, once the family's careless jester, now avoided me entirely, his laughter replaced by shame. And Victoria? She disappeared from the public eye. The woman who had strutted through boardrooms now hid behind closed blinds, her empire tainted beyond repair. And me? For the first time in years, I breathed freely. I rented a modest office in Brooklyn. Sunlight spilled across worn wooden floors, the faint smell of coffee drifting up from the cafe below. With Brenda's help, I launched a consulting firm, dedicated to protecting small businesses from the same kind of fraud and manipulation I had endured. My work was no longer about propping up someone else's empire. It was about building my own. Danielle became my fiercest supporter, her recordings circulating quietly online, not as gossip, but as testimony. Messages poured in from women across the country. You told my story. You gave me courage. And Lauren, my sister-in-law who had confessed her guilt, became one of my first clients. She wanted to separate her finances from the family's toxic web. For the first time, I saw her stand tall, no longer in Margaret's shadow. Months later, Ryan requested a final meeting. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We sat in a quiet Brooklyn cafe, far from the penthouses that had once defined us. He looked older, worn, the sheen of arrogance dulled into exhaustion. I lost everything, he admitted, staring into his untouched coffee. The company, the money, the respect. But losing you, that destroyed me. The words rolled over me like waves. Once they would have broken me. Now they barely touched me. Ryan, I said gently, you didn't lose me. You threw me away. His eyes closed, pain flickering across his face. I stood, sliding my coat over my shoulders. I hope you find redemption, but it won't be through me. And I walked out lighter than I had felt in years. Some nights I stand by my apartment window, the city stretching endlessly in gold and steel. I think about how close I came to disappearing, not physically, but emotionally. I almost let myself fade into the background of someone else's story. But betrayal, as cruel as it is, carries a strange gift. It strips away illusions. It forces clarity. Who values you, who uses you, and who you truly are when the masks fall. And sometimes, it reminds you of your strength. To those watching, let me say this. If you've ever been dismissed, betrayed, or erased by the very people you gave everything to, know this. You are not weak. You are not invisible. And you are not alone. Respect isn't given by blood. It isn't guaranteed by vows. It isn't promised by wealth. Respect is earned through loyalty, kindness, and truth. And if they cannot honor that, then the loss is theirs, not yours. Now I turn to you, my companions in this space. If you were in my shoes, facing a family that conspired to erase you, would you choose forgiveness or justice? Have you ever felt betrayal so deep it shook the ground beneath you? Share your story in the comments. Here, every voice matters. Here, no one suffers in silence. Because in this community, we rise together. We remind the world that betrayal may wound us, but it will never define us. And if you see yourself in my journey tonight, if this story touched your heart, leave a message for yourself below, a promise, a declaration of your worth. And don't forget, subscribe to her betrayal stories, Because here, we'll keep telling the stories others try to silence. Stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the moments we take our power back. As I close this chapter, I hold no hatred, only boundaries, no bitterness, only clarity. And I whisper once more the words my mother gave me. Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness. That truth will guide me, always.